hypothetical question. I think China-Pakistani friendship is ironclad, and China will not allow any violation of Pakistan's legitimate interest in defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity downstream. It is sufficient for me to emphasize one again. Don't do unto others what you do not want others do unto you. That's very important, especially because India is not really in the upper stream. India is, generally speaking, in the midstream of these mighty rivers. So don't try to do things to the people in the downstream because you never know what will be done to you. Be peaceful with your neighbor rather than...
हिम्मत है तो पाकिस्तान का पानी बंद करके दिखाओ। चीनी वकील मिस्टर विक्टर गाव ने भारतीय नारी की तारीखी छितरोल कर दी। किसी भी मुल्क को पाकिस्तान का पानी बंद करने की इजाज़त नहीं दी जाएगी। JF-17, PL-15 और J-10C तो अभी शुरुआत हैं। अभी तो पाकिस्तान को बहुत कुछ देना है। चीनी वकील बिजनेसमैन मिस्टर विक्टर गाव का ऐलान। इंडियन टीवी पर बैठकर भारत को मुंह तोड़ जवाब। आगे मिस्टर विक्टर गाव ने क्या कहा, वीडियो देखिए, वीडियो को लाइक और हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए।
Right, Victor, I did not mean that China would do anything to the Indus. What I was trying to ask you is that should India stop waters of the Indus, is China going to use Brahmaputra against India so that to come to the rescue of Pakistan? Is the Pakistan relationship that important?
You are raising a hypothetical question. I think China-Pakistani friendship is ironclad, and China will not allow any violation of Pakistan's legitimate interest in defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity, including peaceful use of the water in the Indus River, especially because of the treaty between India and Pakistan about the allocation of the water in the Indus River. That's number one. Number two is that between China and India, we share the same river, and China is on the upper stream, India is on the downstream, both in the western part as well as in the eastern part. I hope we will figure out a way to peacefully allocate water in these mighty rivers rather than being subjected to the specter of having water being diverted or being denied to the people in the midstream or in the downstream. It is sufficient for me to emphasize one again. Don't do unto others what you do not want others do unto you. That's very important, especially because India is not really in the upper stream. India is, generally speaking, in the midstream of these mighty rivers. So don't try to do things to the people in the downstream because you never know what will be done to you. Be peaceful with your neighbor rather than...
It sounds less like an advice, more like a threat. Is that what it is? Is this what's Beijing's message to India?
Now, I think my advice is always good intentions, and I hope people in India will listen to my advice. That is, allow me to repeat for the third time, don't do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you.
Are you saying India will pay for it?
Well, I've said to disregard treaty obligations and to deny water to the people in the downstream against the treaty obligation is, in peacetime, a crime against humanity. In wartime, it may be considered as a war crime. So this is very serious because you're talking about millions of the people in the downstream who may be denied the use of water. And because 70% of a human body is composed of water, if you deny human beings of the use and the benefit of water, you're really killing them. You're denying them living standards and livelihood in the most basic form. So I hope the government in India will be really rational enough in never saying, you will never get a drop of water unless you do certain things to me. No, never use water in the Indus River as a blackmail against the people in Pakistan.
You also made a very important point when you said India, China and Pakistan need to sit down together and sort this one out. Are you looking at a trilateral on water? Because India has made it very clear that anything between India and Pakistan should remain bilateral and that India will not welcome any third-party intervention.
Well, if you look at the Indus River, many rivers which eventually converge into the Indus River originate in China's Tibet. And that means that India is not the sole upstream country as far as the water flowing into the Indus River. Actually, there are major rivers which feed into the Indus River originating from China. Therefore, this is the reason why I keep calling on India and Pakistan to really engage in peaceful negotiations between them. And if India and Pakistan cannot come up with an equitable way of allocating the water, as they previously agreed in that Indus River Water Treaty, then China may need to step in. And this is regardless of whether India likes it or not. This is because the water originates in China. China is the real upstream country. And China, in my best judgment, does not want to see the midstream country try to deny water in the Indus River to the people in the downstream country. Period. As simple as that.
Okay, you also made a very important point about lives being lost should water be weaponized. But again, Victor, then what about the lives of those that were lost in the Pahalgam terror attack? The terror is used as an instrument of state policy. Does that not concern and worry Beijing?
I personally condemn terrorist attacks of all kinds and colors and shapes. However, whenever you have a terrorist attack, and inside Pakistan there have been terrorist attacks against Chinese nationals, we always call for thorough investigation and identify the real criminals behind the terrorist attacks and bring them to justice. No country should be justified to jump the gun and jump to the conclusion as if whenever there is a terrorist attack, it must be the government of a certain country. No, you need to exhaust all the investigation and really come up with all the evidence you need to gather before you want to use military means against the other country. Otherwise, you can make use of the terrorist attacks to launch military attack against another sovereign country. That's not the rule of the game in the world of today. The rule of the game is we all condemn terrorist attacks, but everyone need to exhaust the investigation before they will be justified to use legal or military means against another sovereign country.
I would have agreed with you, Victor, if this was only the first time. There are exhaustive investigations carried out for so many terror attacks in the past, but nothing was done by Pakistan, particularly the military. Bahawalpur, the hub for Masood Azhar, Murid Gate, training camps of Hafiz Saeed, and they still thrive. That should concern countries like China that have been fighting terrorism and fundamentalism as a country and as a whole.
I think all of us, all the countries in this part of the world will be better served if we can root out terrorist attacks of any kind. So there is a common goal for us to cooperate to weed out terrorist attacks. And on the other hand, I think every time when a terrorist attack takes place, we need to be very careful in doing the investigation and try to gather all the evidence to bring the real criminals to justice. And again, allow me to emphasize, no country should be justified to jump the gun and jump to the conclusion and launch military attacks against another sovereign country as if they have full proof that the terrorist attacks were launched and endorsed and blessed by that particular sovereign country. No, you need to really walk the walk and talk the talk rather than jump the gun.
Are you saying India jumped the gun on Pahalgam terror attack, that there was no Pakistani hand at all? This even as we see the kind of statements coming in from none other than the Army Chief of Pakistan, General Asim Munir?
No, I do not mean we all have the evidence. I just urge the Indian side to have the patience to do the investigation and gather all the evidence and produce the evidence to mankind as a whole, rather than, for example, shortcutting the investigation, jump to the conclusion and launch military attacks into Pakistan as if, for example, Pakistan is the real criminal behind such terrorist attacks. So we have several points. One, terrorist attacks need to be condemned. Secondly, whenever there is a terrorist attack, everyone needs to exhaust investigation to get to the real bottom of that. Thirdly, before you will be justified to launch military attack against another sovereign country, you need to have fully convinced evidence before you are justified to launch military attack against another country. Otherwise, you escalate the situation. You do not solve the problem. You actually push the crisis into a bigger crisis. And whatever that happened between India and Pakistan, involving that probably the largest scale aerial confrontation, is a big lesson for all the countries involved.
But then again, Victor, another question on the kind of position Beijing has taken post Pahalgam terror attack. India says it has evidence and it has provided that to all its important partners when it comes to Pakistan's hand. On the other hand, you've seen most of the world take a position of neutrality, condemning terror but not taking sides. Why did China, like Turkey and Azerbaijan, choose a side? That Chinese weapons were used against India, that China took a position that was absolutely pro-Pakistan and did not stand with just condemning terror. Why did you go beyond when investigations are still underway, or shouldn't Beijing have waited for proof as well?
Well, I don't think anyone in India should be surprised that China-Pakistani brotherhood and sisterhood and close cooperation did not start in May 2025. China-Pakistan established their relations back in 1951, and throughout all these decades, more than 74 years, China-Pakistan have always dealt with each other with respect, and China has always helped Pakistan, including in military sector. China-Pakistan jointly produced fighter planes, and China has no reservation to share with the Pakistani brothers and sisters the most advanced military technologies, hardware, software, commanding system, for example. So why should anyone in India be surprised that Pakistan has the benefit of the best military equipment at their disposal? If, for example, an aerial combat is instigated by the Indian side. So I hope common sense will come back to New Delhi. Don't be surprised and don't second guess China's commitment to help Pakistan defending their legitimate interest in protecting Pakistani sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Coming back to the water wars, are we looking at a scenario where this hydrological data between China and India that both countries will restart sharing of that data, or are we looking at both taking a very hard position and the sharing of data could take longer than one was expecting, given that Foreign Secretary Misri was in Beijing and they said that the India-China expert mechanism is going to begin soon?
Well, a couple of points. One is that from the Chinese perspective, we do want to develop a very constructive, peaceful ways of cooperation between China and Pakistan and India. Secondly, we really do not want to see the way the Indian government is diverting water from the Indus River, depriving the Pakistani people in the downstream of the benefit of water. We do not like it at all. And we warn the Indian government not to do that, because there will be consequences if the Indian government continues to deny water to the people in Pakistan on the downstream. Thirdly, between China and India, both for rivers in the western part as well as in the eastern part, China is in the upper stream. Water originates from China. Therefore, for India, you need to be very careful. You do not want to create a situation where the Indian side will be accused of conducting illegitimate exercise of denying water to people in the downstream, because if you keep doing that, there will be consequences. What if someone else does exactly what you do to the Pakistani people to you? What will be the consequence, for example? So I hope we will be very philosophical, we'll be very rational, we will really deal with each other with full respect, rather than indulging in the fantasy that I can manhandle the other side without me myself being manhandled by another country.
Final question, Victor. Are we looking at water becoming the new strategic corridor controlled by China, given that most of the water, the resource and the source of this the water comes from China? So is China going to control a very strategic water corridor, and this could become the new CPEC?
Well, first of all, it is a fact that most of the river flowing into India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, or even Central Asia, etc., originate from China, what we call the Tibetan Qinghai Plateau. This is a fact. You cannot deny that fact. Secondly, China is the most responsible country in the world. We always want to handle relations with our neighboring countries, including the allocation of water, in a very professional and very legal and decent manner. So I don't think China has any desire to weaponize water in the rivers originating in China. On the other hand, I think every one of us in China is watching the situation very closely about the attempted Indian diversion of water to people in Pakistan on the downstream in Indus River. My sincere hope Indian government will discontinue such wrongful acts, because you do not know what will be the real consequence if you continue to deny water to the people in the downstream on the Indus River.